Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Christmas Culture Club. I'm Julie.
And I'm Steve. And today we're going to talk about something that we both love. It's maybe, if not the most important aspect of our Christmas celebrations. It certainly is up amongst the top. And that's food and how we celebrate the Christmas and the holiday season with food. So, Julie, we talked about this. For us, because we're American, most of our background is European, right? French, German, the general population of the European influence.
Mhm.
But it's changed, right? I mean, as you're going to get into in a couple minutes, we are a melting pot. While we were heavily influenced through the European import of America, as we've gotten into it, now we've seen with the influence of the African American culture post Civil War, with the Pan American culture, with things like the fleeing of the Jewish population from Europe and their influence. It's much more than just Christmas. We also have the celebration of Hanukkah, essentially at the same time of the year, and a real growing celebration is a celebration of Kwanzaa, which celebrates, essentially it's a celebration of life from around Central Africa, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just a celebration and unification of African American culture specifically. And we'll talk about it as we go on. But like all of this comes together again over that same time period where whether we want to talk about pagan roots or not, but it comes down to the solstice, it comes down to the end of the celestial year. It's that time where you look, you take stock, you celebrate with the people that you love, you celebrate your community. And food has always been a connector. I mean, this goes back to caveman times. I mean, honestly. And like you said, we are a nation of immigrants. You know, we've had all of these different waves of populations that have come ashore. And we're going to go through all of them and talk about what they brought to our holiday celebrations, specifically Christmas, but then also Hanukkah and Kwanzaa, and how it has turned into what we see it today. And it's just absolutely fascinating. Again, you know, the whole joy of this has been discovering the history of what Christmas, what the holiday season has become.
Sure. And if you call back to our episode on Christmas around the world, a big part of it is you were doing the interviews. And I'm sorry I was Christmas shopping. I missed that one until the very end.
It was an epic shopping spree, apparently.
Yes, it was 3 days. But one of the things is I was working on it and editing through that I really got a real charge out of. You were talking with, people from all over the world, and culturally you spoke a lot about their food. And I found it really interesting to listen to it. Like, in Australia, when you were talking with your friend in Australia, and they literally put the shrimp on the Barbie, so it's the seafood. I mean, in our culture, once you get past, I guess, probably the North Atlantic states, I don't know that seafood is that big of a part, or is it?
West Coast.
Sure. Yeah, I can see it.
Chipino in San Francisco is pretty epic. You know,
Mhm.
Dungeness crab when you get into Oregon. I lived in Oregon for years. It's the season for Dungeness. So, I mean, absolutely. You know, so there's so much at play in what creates holiday food traditions, whether it be geographical, whether it be historical. I think now geography plays a lot into it. And we'll talk about, you think about Wisconsin and Minnesota were settled heavily by Scandinavian and German dairy farmers. That still carried through. You've probably seen a Culver's ad that talks about adding cheese to everything. 100% valid. You go up there, that's what you see. Dairy is very much part of it. Their Christmas celebrations are heavily influenced by Scandinavian roots. You go down into areas like Texas and Southern California that, you didn't have the historical settlement back to, the 1700s that stemmed from England. That area was settled by the Spanish.
Mhm.
So those areas have very distinctly different historical food, like celebratory foods that have carried through the years.
Yeah.
And so let's get started on the beginning, the beginning of America as we know it. And I mean, next year we're celebrating 250 years. It seems long for us, but in the grand scheme of things and in talking to Germans or Greek, man, that's like a drop in the bucket. I mean,
Yeah.
their celebrations go back so much longer than ours. But so when you look at what was served, the original settlers were roughly English, some Dutch, some Scandinavian, some mostly Norwegian, some Scottish, but generally British Isles, heavily influenced. And at the time that they were coming over, they had a fairly well-developed Christmas celebration. And a lot of the traditional foods came with them. Even if it meant that they were really difficult to source here, depending on, how established a colony was. Like, did they have cattle? Were they able to keep cattle alive over, through the end of the year and slaughter them for serving? So it was a lot of preserved foods. Fruitcake, number one example. You had a lot of fruits that had been preserved. A lot of turkey. It was a native bird here, so it was eaten really heavily. So it's really fascinating, like in going into the history of what was served, it's the wealthy that kept records. It's the wealthy that we have the most information on. So, one of the lists that I found was from Mount Vernon, George Washington. I mean, it was a couple years into his tenure as America's first president, and they have a list of what was served for dinner. Let's see, an onion soup called the King's Soup, oyster on the half shell, broiled salt roe herring, broiled rockfish, roast beef, Yorkshire pudding, mutton chops, roast suckling pig, roast turkey, chestnut stuffing, round of cold boiled beef with horseradish sauce, cold baked Virginia ham, lima beans, baked acorn squash, baked celery with silvered almonds, hominy pudding, candied sweet potatoes, cantaloupe pickle, spiced peaches and brandy, spiced cranberries. I'm not done yet. Mincemeat pie, apple pie, cherry pie, chest tarts, blancmange plums and wine jelly, snowballs, Indian pudding, grape cake, ice cream, plum pudding, fruit, nuts, raisins, port Madeira, and punch.
So that was the appetizer. It's interesting as you as you were going through this
I'm
list.
exhausted.
It sounds kind of like a Christmas at your house, I think, with all the stuff
Hey
we put
now,
up.
I do not make that many dishes, okay? No way. Nobody has time for that around
But
the
it, but
holiday
it,
season.
as you were pointing all it out, though, the interesting thing is you're listening to you are hearing a lot of roast meats, and you're
Mhm,
hearing a lot of preserved things. I
mhm,
also a friend of mine who she and her husband and their daughter do a lot of reenactment
mhm.
in the from the colonial time period.
Yep.
And they'll talk about, our concept of what a pie would taste like today. Nothing, because sourcing the sweetening agents and
Yeah.
things of
It
that
it this
nature.
was this was pre-sugar trade down into, the Caribbean. This was really the start of slavery era here in the United States. So, I mean, you didn't have sugarcane getting imported. You didn't have, sugar beets weren't a thing at that time. So, yeah, I mean, most of their sweets
Was
at
molasses
most.
based, wasn't it?
Yeah, very much so. But yeah, there's a lot that we recognize though.
Oh, yeah.
It's not that foreign of a list, so that tells you how much of the foods that we eat for Christmas are actually still based upon some of these historical kind of what we consider to be the heyday of America. So I mean, it's English roots, and you have parts of the country that still very strongly celebrate those English roots. And then you have the nostalgia that we have for things like A Christmas Carol. I feel like it's a drinking game for us that every episode we end up mentioning the Christmas Carol. I think we have to pay attention. But I mean, it's valid that that's where a lot of our traditions, like what we view as traditions, come from. Like prime rib, beef Wellington, Yorkshire pudding. I never had Yorkshire pudding before. I lived in New Zealand and they made it for me.
Oh.
And it was like, this is not at all what I expected. So describe it because you did a good job describing
So
it.
Yorkshire pudding, they take the renderings from the prime rib, essentially, and they superheat essentially a cupcake tin kind of for large, and they pour this almost a batter, almost like it's not a sweet, it's savory. This is Yorkshire pudding is not sweet at all. They pour this batter into it, super hot. You can see it bubbling. They throw it in the oven at high heat, and it puffs up. And when we were talking earlier, you mentioned a popover. It looks like a popover. It rises above the actual container, and then once it starts to cool, it sinks down and absorbs all the juices and the fat. So it becomes this delicious accompaniment with prime rib or roast beef and mashed
Mhm,
potatoes or mashed root vegetables. It's huge, especially with prime rib. There used to be a restaurant in Chicago called Lowry's.
mhm.
It was specialized in prime rib. They still have one on the West Coast and one in Las Vegas, I think. And that was a regular accompaniment. They would carve your piece of prime rib with it, serve a jus over it, and they would bring out the Yorkshire pudding.
Nice.
And amazing. It's so, so good.
Yeah. But that covers, that first round of who settled the United States, the English, the German, the Norwegians, generally speaking. And then pretty much up until the Civil War period, you had that. You might have added a little bit more, kind of Scandinavian countries, Scots, Irish, Germans. And that's that kind of first influx of immigration. And those people spread across to prime farmland. So I mean, here being both of us from Chicago, we have a lot of exposure to Scandinavian culture, especially in Germanic culture from Wisconsin, from Minnesota, those areas. So the things that they're eating, that they have brought to Christmas celebrations, sauerkraut, Swedish meatballs, it's
Mhm.
not irony, like it actually is a real deal.
Mhm.
Pickled herring. We have a good friend who we were in Iceland. There was an entire page of pickled herring, like on a menu, and she was in her glory. She's Scandinavian. She's raised by her like Swedish grandmother. Oh, but you still have the roast turkey, the roast duck, the roast beef, kringle. Kringle's a huge deal. Stollen, lutefisk, and lefse, which is a Norwegian that's really popular in Minnesota. Gingerbread, abbeskrever, rice pudding, things of those natures. So again, kind of more simplistic.
So lutefisk, lessa is basically it's a salt packed. I think I'm right. Salt packed cured cod, usually, isn't it?
No, so that's baklava or bakla. Lutefisk is pickled herring.
Pickled
It's
herring.
just
Okay.
yeah, I think it might be cured in a different way. I don't know that it's like the same as, but and the lefse is a potato flatbread essentially. Like a
Oh,
it's kind of a yeah, the best description I saw of it was a potato flatbread.
okay.
Yeah, so definitely interesting. I had posted, requesting friends of mine to talk about their holiday traditions. And we have a group of friends in Minnesota, and they had all said, like, we don't know that we love this, but it's our tradition and we still have it. And, they likened it to be the malort of fish.
This is yeah, because they take cod, right? And they salt
I
pack it.
don't think it's cod. I think it's herring.
I
Yeah.
know
It's
it's somewhere
Portuguese
when
and Spanish and Italian. They do the cod.
okay. The dried and salt
Yeah.
cube.
Yeah.
I know
Salt cod.
somewhere maybe it's Norway. Anyway, but then they rehydrate it
Mhm.
and oh it's I'm sorry if you love it. My taste buds and I'll try anything, but I'm like, it's so strong. Ugh. But people that love it, like you said, Malort.
Yeah.
For those
Yeah.
of you who don't know, Malort is a liqueur that is really popular especially in Chicago. I don't is it Polish? Malort?
No, it's Swedish.
Swedish. It is
Tastes like grandma smells.
yeah, it's horrible.
No, it's not. When you've drank it as much as I have, like, it's a
Yeah.
whole thing in our world. You do a
Well, do
shot
you
of it.
drink it or do you slam it? If you
Oh,
slam it,
you
I
slam it.
understand. Yeah, so you're not
100%.
really tasting it. It's burning
You
down.
smell it. That's why it's called
Yeah,
you taste like
it
grandma
smells
smell.
like bad. It literally smells like bad socks, in my opinion.
It's anise. It's really heavily anise and absinthe flavored. So I think that's what I get from it.
Yeah.
It's kind of become a cult favorite. I mean, we were fans of it before. We like to torture people, but anyway, we
Oh yeah.
digress.
Back to
We could
food.
talk yeah, we could talk about Malort for a really long time. It's really painful. So, we hit on the first wave of immigration, but then we have a second wave that comes in. And this is where things start to shift that we get a different ethnic population, couple different ethnic populations that are moving in. It is Southern Europeans, Italians, a little bit of Spanish, some Portuguese. Certain areas of the country are very heavily settled with Portuguese. And then you get Eastern Europeans, Polish, Jewish that are fleeing persecution from Russia, from Poland, but then also Russians themselves who are also just fleeing religious persecution in general. So this is where you see that kind of next round of influences come into our holidays. And I'm specifically Polish and Irish. So it's always interesting as you think back on what you experienced as a child and how certain traditions were sacrosanct. And, it really was for me, I think Polish Christmas stood out bigger than Christmas with like my Irish side of the family.
Did you guys do like hundreds of pierogi every year for Christmas?
So I don't remember the pierogi as much. So I didn't like fish as a child. We did within Polish tradition, at least here in America, you do not eat meat and on Christmas Eve, and the celebration is on Christmas Eve. That's the big day. You don't eat meat in honor of Jesus in the manger with animals. So it would be either vegetarian or it would be a seafood based meal. I didn't love seafood. So for me, we really didn't like I didn't partake of it when my grandmother was alive and she was cooking. And, my uncles all just gush about my grandmother's cooking. And I still have very strong food memories of watching her hands on the skillets, frying perch, making the pierogi, making the angel wings. I have this very vivid memory of reaching up and grabbing the angel wings off of the tray that I have now.
Mm.
So it's just those things that carry on. The smells, just the smell of butter. Just a lot of butter being melted is what I associate with Polish Christmas. And then to go to the Irish side of the family, I mean, it was very traditional. It was turkey, it was ham, it was, we don't typically do roast beef of any sort. But, so that there was more cultural traditions associated or attached to like my Polish celebrations. But, we have Italian friends. And I mean, Italian, they also have the Feast of Seven Fishes where you're just doing all of the fish dishes on Christmas Eve, but then Christmas Day is, unhinged, where it's all the meats, it's the lasagna, it's the ravioli, it's, stuffed shells, porchetta, all of those things. I mean, one thing I remember from Polish Christmas that I did love was mushroom soup. Love the mushroom soup. I still to this day love it. But, all the cookies, all the flavors.
It's interesting too because I do think the regionalism. I'm German, predominantly. I mean, we're European, but predominantly German. And my German grandmother, our family tradition was on Christmas Eve, you would have a pork meal, and it wasn't. I mean, sauerbraten was a big part. So
Mhm,
sometimes it's sauerbraten, sometimes it was basically pork cutlets and a pork, not even a ginger. Sauerbraten is a ginger-based gravy,
mhm,
but it wasn't ginger, but it was another type of gravy, and it was served with spätzle, which
mhm.
is, the drop noodle. Basically, you put it through a ricer and it drops in and it boils, and then you fry it with butter. And Germans, right? That was always Christmas Eve. But then on Christmas Day, Christmas Eve was sort of like the gathering meal. Christmas Day was just the party celebration meal where everything goes chaotic. And on Christmas Day, we would always have the ham and the
Mhm.
accompaniments for that, which also included German potato salad. My son's mom, her family were predominantly of English descent. So every year for them, Christmas Eve wasn't a lot of that, but Christmas Day, the dinner was always a roast beef, never a variation. And for 20 some odd years, that's what we experienced, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, it's interesting just to see, and also I have a good friend who's Polish and clings strongly to like her family's. I feel like they're more strongly Polish than my family is. And they're out of Detroit, so they had different traditions and they do what's called city chicken. And I remember,
It's
he
pork.
knows it.
Always. Yes,
Yeah.
go ahead, tell 'em what it is.
No, well, you might be able to explain it better because I have just secondhand knowledge of it. So you talk about it
So
then.
city chicken isn't chicken at all, it's pork,
Yeah.
and generally it's cubed pork, and usually it's from the butt roast, the one of the cheaper cuts, the Boston butt or the butt roast, and you cut it off, it's cubed, it's put on a skewer, and it's marinated. Different families do different spices, but mostly it's salt, pepper, onion, garlic. It's allowed to marinate. Then you basically essentially bread it and you deep fry.
Mhm.
And you can serve it with a gravy. My grandmother made it, and it's one of my fondest memories.
Yeah, so her family gets together and it's a community effort that they all get together, and I mean it's an heirloom recipe that's been passed down, and it's much like, I've seen in a lot of Italian American families where it's the raviolis. It's the making of the raviolis. That whether it be all the women or whether it be all the men that get together, whomever the chef is in the family, whoever's carrying those recipes through the family line, they're going to get together and they're actually going to, make these ravioli, make the city chicken, make the pierogi, make the sauerbraten, make the sauerkraut, all these things that it's almost like they're complicated meals because it draws everyone together. I mean,
Mhm.
tamales, it's another perfect example. Tamales is super labor intensive and it's a gathering and it is a long day or multi day event extravaganza of making them. Half the time you eat them at Christmas because it's the only time people have time to make them,
Right.
so it's just fascinating seeing that. No, but then the next thing that we need to talk about is all the enslaved people. You have all the population, like the pre-Civil War and then post-Civil War African Americans. They've been pulled from their roots. They brought them to America and had to adapt. And I think that there's, to this day, especially in the South, there's heavy, heavy aspects of Southern hospitality, Southern cooking that comes from African roots. You look at fried chicken, oxtail, smothered pork,
Yep.
gumbo, collard greens especially. I did read one quote that said, "It is not Christmas unless there's deviled eggs on the table." And I thought that was interesting because that one's different for me. But yams,
Mhm.
I mean, that's a very, very traditional, like African dish. Sweet potato pie, banana pudding. So that all has kind of moved through the diaspora of Civil War, people moving north, moving back south, all across the country. It's just, again, it's fascinating just to see the movements of human geography and how it impacts like how we celebrate.
Well, honestly, I don't know this for a fact, but I heavily suspect that the incorporation of macaroni and cheese
Mhm.
into Christmas dinner is an influence from, the Southern African American culture. I
Absolutely.
never, first time I ever had it was a dear friend of mine from Cincinnati who brought it over. We had a family, or not a family, a friend's Christmas a day or two after we all got together and brought Christmas, and he brought macaroni and cheese, and I went, really? And he goes, yeah, every year for Christmas.
Yeah.
And it's not, I mean, it's a rich, thick, beautiful
Mhm.
macaroni and cheese. It just, the cheese is so
But I
good.
mean, like, I think that's a tie for everything that you do on Christmas or
Right.
over the holidays. It is all about celebrating in the form of throwing the most calories at something possible. It's
Mhm.
the darkest time of year. It's the time of year where you're hungry. In prior times, like people didn't have enough to eat, but they would have this celebration and they would make it special. And it still carries on that. I mean, dear God, that menu from Mount Vernon, like 30 plus dishes. Who's eating all that? But I mean, it was how you were celebrating, how you were making it different from any other day.
Sure.
So now, like, we've kind of hit all the kind of historical influences. And now you look at the geopolitics of where people settled across the United States and how that impacts what you eat. I mean, I just told the story of the difference between Polish Christmas in Chicago and Polish Christmas in Detroit. I have a Scandinavian family that we're friends with that's from Massachusetts. Things that she does are very different from people that I know in Minnesota that are Scandinavian. But there's still some core, like the center of it. We talked about Wisconsin and Minnesota. It's just that, oh, the one that I found, cannibal sandwich. Have you ever heard of this?
No.
It's a horrible name, but apparently is a total Christmas thing. I actually reached out to a couple friends from Green Bay and I'm like, "What is this? What tell me what this is."
Sounds like something they do in Green Bay.
100 freaking percent.
Go
So
Bear.
it's yes, raw beef, ground raw beef, and raw onion on rye bread, and that's it.
Well, okay, but I mean,
So it's basically a poor man's steak tartare.
yeah, I mean, look at France. Every restaurant you go into has got steak tartare.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess puts it in context, but yeah. So that one, cheesy potatoes, funeral potatoes, hot dish. I think there's 8,000 names for it. We
Mhm.
call ours Nani's funeral potatoes. It sounds terrible, but it was her recipe for funeral potatoes.
Yeah.
We love it. We have it roughly every Christmas. It's delicious. And again, it's 8,000 calories, but calories don't count on Christmas. Stollen, Kringle, your family's Christmas cookies. I celebrated in a cookie exchange this past weekend, and it stems from a Pittsburgh tradition, mostly Italian, but it's been absorbed into the Eastern European tradition as well. And every family has their cookie. Their individual cookie that they bring to the table, whether it be pizzelles, whether it be cannolis, whether it be, some of the kolaches. That was what I made this weekend. I have a recipe that's very similar to it tastes the way my grandmothers remind me.
Sure.
So love it. A brandy old fashioned, Wisconsin thing. My husband hates them. He thinks it's a bastardization of an old fashioned with brandy instead of bourbon. And
It's
then,
a drink, an alcoholic
yeah,
beverage.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if you've ever been to Wisconsin Supper Club, like that's like what you're getting. If you're ordering an old fashioned, you're getting a brandy old fashioned. And they could say that you're from Chicago if you order a bourbon old fashioned. Brandy slush. I actually just saw this one a couple days ago on a Instagram reel, and I was like, "What is this?" And it was frozen concentrated orange juice. Oh my god, what else was in it? It was all sugar, and then you dump a bottle of brandy on it, and you make it in like a Kemp's ice cream bucket and you throw it in the backyard until it turns to slush. And then you scoop out the slush and you pour soda on top of it. And I was like, poof, alrighty then.
Well, if that doesn't sound like Wisconsin, I don't know what.
100%. And they make fun of us for Malort. Give me a
Yeah,
break.
right.
Yeah. I mean, talking geographical areas, Louisiana. You and I are both huge fans of Louisiana, and
Yeah.
just, it is truly one of the most melting pot like spaces in the United States where you have African, French, Asian, Creole, Caribbean all coming together. So I love a turducken. I think it's hilarious. I've never made one, but they're fascinating to me. Gumbo, boudin balls, mekshou, collard
Tell them what
greens.
tell them what a boudin ball is.
Boudin is a type of sausage, so typically it's mixed with rice and then deep fried. I forget if there's a coating on it or
It's
not.
blood. It's it's
Is
it's
it a blood
it's
sausage?
constituted blood sausage, yeah, with
Okay.
rice and they do usually because it is rice, it's basically this conglomeration. It's amazing. But then they do roll in balls and they roll it usually I think in well some will do cornmeal, but I think the traditional one is basically just the coarse
Breadcrumb.
breadcrumb.
Yeah, I mean, you'd stuff a turkey with boudin.
Mhm.
It'd be boudin stuffing, or you do an oyster stuffing. I have friends from Maryland that their family goes back to almost the settling in the United States, and they had one of the original parcels of land on the eastern shore of Maryland, and they have a charter that they were given a barrel of oysters every year from the Maryland governor. And so their family has a very strong tradition of oyster stuffing. We actually had a Thanksgiving one year together, and I made oyster stuffing based on her grandmother's recipe. So it's just, again, it's these kind of crazy historic things that keep on catching up with us, and we keep carrying on. So, but then you look towards a little bit farther west, again, talking about areas that didn't get settled originally by the English influence, Texas. Strong Tex-Mex influence even now, even though, Texas is probably made up of half people from other places and not Texans native. But brisket,
Right.
tamales, barbecue, pozole, beans and rice, fajitas, sweet potatoes, pecan pie, of course, because Texas pecans, I have to say, are pretty amazing. Sweet potato pie, tres leches cake, Texas sheet cake. It's all very, very different, but different celebratory foods that reflect the influence. And as people are coming to those areas, even if they're new settlers, they're absorbing that new flavor.
Oh,
They
sure.
may be bringing part of their own, but then suddenly there's going to be fajitas or somebody's going to smoke a brisket and add it to the celebration. And it just adds to the fabric of why, Christmas season is amazing.
Yep. Yeah, we have, as we've talked in the past, I teach part-time in elementary school, and we have a very diverse population in DeKalb. And there are a lot of kids who are of Hispanic heritage, Mexican heritage. And just literally on Monday, when I was in school, we were talking about Christmas and Christmas traditions and food, and we were talking about what does your family usually make, and the conglomeration, the way one culture impacts another. I can't tell you how many of the kids told me that their parents, they make tamales, their family will make tamales, and they'll have it with ham. They'll have ham and tamales, and so you get all these different variations. When I lived in Northwest Indiana, I worked for this multinational corporation. One of my associates and one of my dear friends, his name is Jack. Joaquin is actually his name, but he goes by Jack. He's the second oldest of seven. Every year, the week before Christmas, the family, all the sisters and the mom, the men were not invited. It was all the sisters and the mom. They would get together and they would make hundreds of tamales for the family for the Christmas tradition. And I was fortunate enough because Jack was a friend and his parents liked me that he'd bring me some. And oh man, I mean, unless you've had a real homemade tamale, you
Mhm.
haven't lived. But you see the cross cultural aspect of it because even with him, it was funny because we were talking about it. They don't eat. I think Christmas Eve they don't eat meat. And I said, "So Christmas Day you do?" And he said, "Yeah, we'll have that." He said, "But we don't eat meat." I said, "What do you have?" He said, "We have lamb." What? And I
Hey, I saw a thing that was a turkey done in a mole sauce, like a roast turkey in a mole.
that's traditional in
Yeah, in
Hawaii.
Mexico.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but it was just beautiful. Oh my god, it looked absolutely gorgeous.
Well, there are dozens and dozens of different types of mole.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah, but
place in Milwaukee. There's a restaurant that specializes in
mm,
moles, and I think they've got 8 or 10 of them on menu every day, and they've got a special of the week. But
yeah.
anyway, I
Yeah.
digress.
Yeah. West Coast we talked about, West Coast, I mean, you had a lot of different influences. You had a lot of Asian, Chinese, Vietnamese influences. Those flavors have been brought into celebrations for Christmas. It's also what foods are available. So we talked about it, Dungeness crab season. I lived in Central California, tri-tip. Tri-tip is king. Nobody's doing brisket there. It's all tri-tip for Christmas. You're going to have the fire, the green oak in the backyard, and you're going to be roasting a tri-tip, and it's going to be lovely. Cioppino, a traditional seafood stew out of San Francisco, very much a part of the tradition. So it's just fascinating to see how it's all come together. But then you have another aspect that comes in from religious celebrations,
Hmm.
religious cultures. So we have the Jewish diaspora that came over, anywhere like from, east to, east.
Hmm.
Huge influence. And I mean, not only just because they have a partnership or like a symbiotic celebration at the same time that often gets married together with Christmas in the form of Hanukkah. But, you look at it, you have cured salmon lox, you have bagels that have been added to it. Challah bread, French toast is part of my actual Christmas morning tradition that I make for Christmas brunch. But Hanukkah, talking about it specifically, and Hanukkah actually begins in a couple days. So may your season be full of light to all who celebrate. But it's the Festival of Lights, and it's based upon oil lasting and the survival of people under tremendous odds. So everything is oil-based. So you have latkes. Latkes are every look at your face.
Yeah,
Now,
we're
are
not
you
Jewish, but we're German, and so
yeah.
it's a Germanic tradition, and
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
I still have my grandmother's recipe for their potato pancakes.
You might have to make them tomorrow.
Well, it's funny because I'm getting I'm having my car service tomorrow, and I'm going to be out closer to Chicago, and there's a really good Jewish deli, so
Nice.
I may stop in and get a nice pastrami sandwich and some latke.
There you go. So your latkes, how do you eat them? What do you put on them?
Okay, so here's the really weird thing. This is where we're talking about cross culture, right? Traditionally, they're usually served with applesauce is one of the things, and sometimes sour cream. We were raised, and this is some of the
Uh-oh.
Southern influence. We put kidney beans and butter on
What?
ours. Try it sometime.
I've never
It's amazing. Shannon, what she thinks I'm nuts, but it's we because we had some Southern members in our family. It was like, yeah, we put it on there. Yeah, but you know,
carbs on top of carbs?
carbs on top of carbs and butter. Carbs, fat, and butter. What more can you ask for at Christmas?
Yeah, no, so my dad loves applesauce and sour cream.
Hmm.
I'm a sour cream and chives person, but, again, this similar that it's, part of a Germanic tradition is also very much Polish because you had a fluid border at that time. It was all Prussia. It's a poor person's food. It's something that stores well. So this time of year where you're not in a culture and a climate where you can farm, yeah, you can have potatoes that you're pulling out of your pantry and they're still fresh and edible and it's a big dose of calories. So yeah, my dad loves nothing more than a good latke or potato pancake. And it's generally what he wants. His birthday is December 23rd. So it's generally one of the things that he wants to celebrate with is that we go to a Polish restaurant or he gets a good latke. So now I'm going to mess up this word, but Süffingut, the jelly donuts. So fried dough. And I apologize. I hope someone can correct me on that. But, I've had them. They're amazing, and it's, again, the oil, it's the sweetness of the season. Brisket, again, matzo ball soup, noodle krugel. I've had a couple amazing ones. It's just really fascinating whether it's sweet or savory, whichever version you want to go to. Challah bread, love it. I live on the edge of the Orthodox section of Chicago. So we
Right.
have several very, very good Orthodox delis or Orthodox communities, but also Jewish delis in the area. So I can get some killer challah bread. Um,
Nice.
Gelt, rugula, honey cake, apple fritters, all the things that just make a season sweeter. So again,
What was your reaction the first time you tried a sweet kugel?
I don't love them. I'm a savory. I'm a savory.
I expected savory. I took a bite and I went, huh?
Yeah,
It it took a solid minute for my brain to go, what? Huh?
yeah.
And I do like it, but but
I prefer the savory. Let's just put it
yeah,
that
I do
way.
too.
I am never gonna turn down some Jewish grandmother's amazing heirloom recipe. Like you, I will eat it and I will smile and thank somebody and ask about the recipe, but I
Yep.
prefer a savory if I have my choice. And we talked about this earlier. Another addition to the scene that's relatively recent in the scope is Kwanzaa. Kwanzaa is really gaining in popularity as this population is trying to define itself independent and really regain some of the culture that it lost over a long period of time. And it was created in the 60s actually, which I didn't realize it was. I thought it was even more recent than that. I didn't realize that it was 60s kind of during the Cultural Revolution at that time. And it's celebrated for a week. It's it's December 26th through January 1st. And the Keromu is the feast portion of it. And so that's the important kind of community. You bring your community dinner together, or your community together for dinner. And that's December 31st. But it's just, again, some of these lists of foods are pretty similar from what Southern traditions are. Collard greens, yola fries, candied yams, black eyed peas, super, super important on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day within the African American community and Southern community. Fried plantains, peanut stew. I've had really good peanut stew in my life. And also, people are really channeling the food colors. This is something that you see in the
It's a real
Italian
vibrant
tradition.
celebration.
Yes, yes. But you think about it, like Neapolitan bars within the Italian community, they're channeling the flag colors. Within the Polish community, it's all about red and white. So it's really fascinating how we choose as we've become maybe apart from that original place of celebration of like our traditions, you create your own. And you try and grab onto anything. So if it's the colors, if you're making something, the dip that's, red, white, and green, whatever, however it makes you happy. But I
Well,
don't know.
and don't forget the Asian influence. I mean,
Yeah.
and this is honest to God truth. When my son's mom and I divorced, she would go back to Cincinnati, and of course we always stay with her family, and of course I wouldn't at that point. But I wanted to be with my son, so I'd go down and I'd stay at a hotel, and we would celebrate Christmas. But they had their big Christmas dinner.
Mhm.
On a number of occasions, 3 or 4 times, I had Chinese dinner on
Yep.
Christmas because they were
Absolutely.
open.
Yep.
And it was delicious. And it's funny because I hear more and more people talking about incorporating, fried rice or lo mein or things like that into their Christmas celebration.
This is what they grew up having or something like that, you
Or they
know?
watched a lot of A Christmas Story and went, "Oh, this is cool."
I've only done it one time, and it was when I lived in New Zealand. We celebrated big on New Year's Eve, or I'm sorry, Christmas Eve, and then Christmas Day. Like we just didn't feel like doing anything, so we went out and had Chinese food. And I was at the place was packed,
Oh, yeah.
absolutely packed.
Yep.
So I mean, it's just such a cool tradition and such a uniquely, I feel like, an American tradition. So I do love it, and it just shows that every single one of us bears witness and like influences our community. We've just become such a celebration that's built from, just blending. Like centuries of blending. I mean, the area that my grandparents are from in Poland changed borders multiple times and is officially now it's back in Polish hands. It was Russian, it was Prussian, it was this, it was Germanic, so there's little bits of everything that's involved, but it's all mixed. I mean, we have European, we have African, we have Latin American. My husband works in a firehouse with mostly Puerto Rican and Cuban guys. I got invited to a family dinner last year, and they made the most amazing spread. Chon and the coquito, and oh my God, the plantains, and it was divine. It is such a happy celebration. It is such a celebration of food. We didn't even really touch on that because I feel like that's a relatively modern influx into the United States is, looking at the Caribbean cultures
Mhm.
specifically. I mean, here in Chicago, Puerto Rican is a
Sure.
very, very strong
Yes.
influence. Yeah. Cuban. I mean, it's just, we could do a whole episode on that. I love coquito like nothing else. That's become my Christmas drink, actually.
Mm.
Like I make coquito from scratch and it's just so good. But it's like we're just a mix. I mean, you have German Christmas trees, you have British carols, you have Dutch Kinderklaas, you have or Sinterklaas, sorry. We have African American spiritual traditions. We've got, Mexican posadas, we've got Scandinavian baking, we've got Sicilian cookies. I mean, all of it. Spice it up with some Hollywood nostalgia, drizzle some hot cocoa on top, serve it on a platter, and it just tells you what America is today. That every time you think about it, you know, my mom comes from an Irish Catholic family. My dad comes from a very strongly Polish Catholic family. You know, how do they meet and create a balance of traditions? And then it gets handed on, it gets handed on, it gets handed on. You know, each of us wants to make our own stamp on how we celebrate the holidays. We remember the best of what our childhood was and what makes an impact on us. So
Mhm.
I don't
Oh,
know.
yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that you hope for is that as our children, our children's children, and our children's children's children grow, that it'll continue,
Mhm.
to just incorporate all the different facets and become something new and something greater.
Yeah.
I enjoy I enjoy the cultural diversity. I enjoy biodiversity too, but I enjoy the cultural diversity of food. And you and I have talked a number of times. Food brings people together.
Mhm.
It's the wonderful thing about living where we live is there is such great diversity if you just take advantage of it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that plays all the way through our Christmas traditions.
Christmas, holiday, I mean, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, Christmas, solstice. We have friends that have a solstice party every year.
We've got a friend who's a Wiccan, and
Yeah.
they do
Love
solstice
it.
every year.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. It really strikes a chord in my heart, you know, especially now researching like all of the Christmas traditions, realizing how very pagan they are, you know, like how almost all of it is just bent around solstice. It's
Mhm.
fascinating. So,
I'm just curious what people do for Festivus besides
all right, I have a story that I'm going to tell. I will try and make this quick. So, I have a very important uncle in my life, and he realized he's like, all these holidays are just made up. I'm gonna make up a holiday. And he did not have children. So he made up solstice. And you know, oh God, you had to hit a golf ball over water. You had to read bad poetry. You had to cut off a tie to celebrate a break from the new year. You had to eat dessert first and make a pizza. And so he had nieces and nephews that were a part of his life that were pretty little at the time. And they were raised to believe that this was a holiday, that everybody did this. So Ryan and I went, they live in Atlanta. So Ryan and I went down there. I've been down there multiple times to celebrate solstice with them. And the kids, when they got old enough, like all their friends came over. They're like, this is awesome. You know, they'd be like swinging a golf club off the front porch, chipping balls over the stream that was next door. I mean, it was just a completely made up holiday just to make you realize it's part of their core memories now. They're
Sure.
now adults, and it's hilarious to
Yeah,
see
I mean,
like how you can create your own thing. You
yeah.
know, I mean, I have a family that I know, they make pizza on Christmas.
Oh,
They all get together and they just have chaotic, like the kitchen is an absolute bloody disaster, but they just make pizzas all day on Christmas. They keep on noshing on stuff and everybody, there's no pressure. Everybody just has a blast, you
mhm,
know? So make it what you want. Eat as much as you can. Eat as many calories as you can so we can all survive the long, cold winter. But I mean, it's just all of these things just make it feel not only like a shared experience, but also a personal experience. You
right.
know, we're such a patchwork that's gotten put together, and all the stories that we hand down to our kids, our families, our chosen family, whatever it may be. I just hope you celebrate it this holiday season. So,
Okay.
yeah. So,
All right. So before we head off, what's going on and what's sort of
well,
chatter out there?
Black Friday sales were up 6%, so it was kind of surprising to some of the analysts, but apparently people are out shopping. And like you said, Steve, it doesn't matter how penny pinching people might be during the year. Come Black Friday and Christmas, people step up and spend money. So that, you know, you still have Cyber Monday sales going on that are, you know, kicking around. People are setting up trees. So put aspirin in your tree. I actually did find out. I read a paper by a arborist. He is a doctorate in arbor sciences and found that aspirin does impact the life of your Christmas tree. So it was quite surprising because we had a conversation about that with Rick
Of course,
from
not for
the
your
Tree
tree. It's your tree is nothing more than what
Vodka,
you said what?
a plastic toilet brush
Yeah,
dipped green.
toilet
Yeah. Yes. But no, I mean, we got about 22 days to Christmas, I believe, is where we're at, if I'm not mistaken.
Mhm.
So
Well,
Well,
we're
it's
recording it at this point, but this will actually air.
yeah, true. So I like 19 days to Christmas. So we're getting down there. So start organizing, but also start celebrating. Like manage your stress. It's not perfect, but it's perfect for what you need it to be. So I think that's a good thing. But we're gonna do a quiz. I'm gonna
Okay.
do the quiz this time. So
All right, I'm ready.
it pertains to this infamous 1790 dinner held for George and Martha Washington at Mount Vernon that I referenced. How many dishes were served?
Well, you read off about 400, I think, but
Not quite that high.
16, 15, 16.
36 different dishes. I am
Whoa.
never making that many dishes for Christmas.
So you'll stop at 30.
I usually do like 20. Come on now. I do usually bake like probably 6 to 8 desserts that I take to my family's Christmas. So, I
Wow,
mean,
36. That's crazy.
yeah, I can't even imagine. And I mean, you think about the work, like it's one thing. I'm going to go trek to Costco and pick up my ingredients.
Mm-hmm.
But like at that time, knowing what it takes to get all of that harvested, get it moved, into your home, preserved, prepared, you're roasting over an open fire, like you're cooking. I mean, that's crazy. That's exhausting. So,
Yeah, of course, they probably had a team of 40 people cooking for them.
yeah,
So,
something like that.
but
But anyway, so that being said, our next episode is actually going to be a really serious episode, and it's one that we recorded a little while ago. That is, I feel like it's super impactful, and we talk a lot about the holidays being very happy, and everybody goes through a different time in their life when the holidays are not happy or it's a struggle, and so we actually talked to a grief counselor about some tips, some tricks, some warning signs, some ways to help, some ways to be compassionate and empathetic to people that might be struggling and going through a tough time these holidays. So please listen up. It's a great episode. It was truly moving to actually interview this person. So we're really excited to bring that to everybody.
and then the following week, which will be Christmas Eve,
Mhm.
it
The
will
big
be
man. We're
the
going to
big
talk about
man
the big man.
Santa Claus, and you'll finally get to hear my story of my Uncle Lou. Uncle
All
Luke
right.
Saves Christmas. So
On
anyway,
that
yeah.
note,
All right. So thanks for being with us. We'll hopefully you're enjoying it. We've asked you before. We'll ask you again. If you are enjoying it, please consider subscribing. We enjoy having you with us, and always feel free to comment. For Christmas Culture Club, I'm Steve.
I'm Julie. Merry Christmas, everybody. Enjoy the ramp up to the holiday season. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye.